A long, dark, and desolate highway is often used for the setting for a lot of horror stories. And for a good reason. A lot of us have found ourselves in such a situation. The idea of driving alone with nothing in sight other than the darkness of a vast landscape is enough to send chills down one's spine. Especially if one were to run into any situation that required help from others or even something unexplainable. No highway in America fits the bill more for such an ominous scenario than I-70 in Utah. There is a portion of I-70 that stretches for 106 miles that has neither an exit or gas station, nor is there any phone service. It is often referred to as the loneliest and sometimes scariest highway in America. Unfortunately for some who have driven through the route, the highway's reputation proved to be appropriate. According to an account told to me by a personal friend of mine, he had experience with something that he still has trouble explaining to this day. Over a decade ago, while driving across a few states to visit a friend, James had eventually found himself driving through I-70 in Utah late at night. He was vaguely familiar with the stretch of highway, but didn't really give it much thought. It wasn't until he checked his phone a few minutes into his drive that he realized that he didn't have any service. Other than an inconvenience, James didn't think it was too much of a concern. Another thing James noticed was that it had been a few hours since he'd seen any other car. It truly was one of the loneliest highways he'd ever driven. As time passed in an effort to keep himself entertained, James surveyed the dark landscape. Everything seemed normal, boring, but normal. That is, until something caught his eye in the distance. What was probably 100 yards to the side of the highway was the silhouette of something strange on top of a small hill, the moonlight illuminating it. Even from a far distance, James could tell that whatever it was tall and lanky. The top of its head looked as if it had a pair of antlers. At first he figured it was a statue, but to his shock, the silhouette would eventually fall forward on all fours like an animal and scamper away, disappearing among the many hills. While James assured it could have been a deer, he had never seen one so big. Nor had he ever seen one stand on their hind legs in the way the silhouette had. Maybe it was just his tired eyes playing tricks on him, James had thought. After several minutes passed by, he was able to convince himself that the long drive was starting to affect him. The very first chance he had, he'd be getting a cheap motel room somewhere, he told himself. But to his shock, there again, a distance away from the side of the road, was the same silhouette, standing on a hill seemingly looking toward his car's direction as he traveled through the highway. It was unmistakable. Whatever the silhouette was, it was like nothing he had ever seen. It stood way too easily and at attention to be an animal, but due to its size and shape, it didn't make sense that it could be a man either. Whatever it was, James knew he wasn't sticking around long enough to find out. He quickly stepped on the gas and sped through the highway as fast as he could. The thought had entered James's mind that whatever the thing was, if it had been the same thing he saw earlier, it had run parallel to the highway, quick enough to get to where he saw it again. Fortunately for James, he did not spot the silhouette again for the rest of the drive along I-70. And while he wasn't a believer of such legends, he was aware of tales of creatures like skinwalkers and wendigos. But while James continues to claim he still doesn't necessarily believe in such things, he has admitted he has not driven that stretch of highway since. Another personal account from somebody who claims to have experienced something along the same stretch of highway comes from a user online who worked as a truck driver. In between deliveries and going on for 48 hours straight without much sleep, Ray had decided to park by the side of the quiet highway for the night to get some rest. After eating a sandwich with some cola while watching a movie on his portable DVD player, it wasn't long until Ray decided to eventually get some shut-eye in the sleeper cabin section of his truck. He was no more than a few hours into his slumber when Ray would be awakened by the noise of something outside. For the next couple of seconds, Ray sat still in his bed, waiting to see if what he heard was actually from a dream. However, much to his dismay, he would soon hear something large jump on the hood of his truck before eventually making its way to the roof. Ray's vision was blocked from seeing anything due to the curtain that separated the driver's section of the cabin from the sleeper section. At first, Ray figured that somebody was trying to break into his truck, but those thoughts quickly faded away when the sound of what could only be described of was large claws scratching against the surface of the truck's exterior. Ray pondered whether or not it could be a bear, wolf, or even a cougar, but neither of those animals were large enough or agile enough to be what was currently on the top of his truck. It wasn't until he suddenly heard what could only be described as something tapping on the driver's side window that Ray quickly shot up out of the bed and yelled out,
"Hey, get the hell out of my truck!"
while banging the ceiling of his cabin as hard as he could with both hands. It's at that moment that whatever it was quickly jumped off the roof of his truck and onto the roof of the tractor before eventually jumping off. Ray would eventually hear the footsteps quickly disappear into the distance. With his heart racing, Ray grabbed a handgun from the compartment under the bed and made his way to the driver's cabin to look to see if the coast was clear. But even with a gun in hand, there was no way he was making his way outside to investigate. Even with the lack of sleep, Ray would decide to cut it short and drive away out of there as fast as he could. After inspecting his truck in the morning, Ray found dents on the hood of his truck and notable scratches on the roof. Ray admitted that it felt weird writing the causes for it as wild animals to the insurance company because he had always believed it was something more than that. But as distressing as the experience was for him, Ray continued to drive along that stretch of highway on I-70. He just chooses to never sleep on the side of the road of I-70 again. There are other experiences reported by others who have traveled down I-70. Stories ranging from somebody seeing a lone woman on the side of the road, only for the figure to wander off before she can be asked if she needed a ride, while others have claimed to see odd lights hovering in the sky beyond the horizon. Whether these tales are due to the darkness playing tricks on a tired mind, trying to keep itself occupied on a lonely stretch of highway, or due to something more unexplainable, one will not truly know until maybe they experience it themselves. Maybe next time you decide to go on a trip, take a drive down I-70 and see if you can be one of the lucky ones or unlucky ones to get a tale of your own down the darkest and scariest highway in America.